Welcome, everybody. We're now beginning our class day on abortion, one of our many controversial topics that we'll cover in this class. So, on some of the readings that we do, some of the topics that we cover, when I talk to students or when I look at their reading responses, they'll say something like, well, I've never really thought about this issue before, so I thought the reading was interesting because it never really crossed my mind whether it was right or wrong. You don't get that concerning abortion. Everyone probably has some view on whether it's right or wrong. Now, part of what our class does is we admit that everyone has opinions and that everyone has the right to their own opinion. But what we want to do is we want to investigate other people's opinions, not in order to show other people to be wrong, but to better understand our own positions. Now, on some issues, some of you, I wouldn't say this, but I know some of you do. Some of you will say, look, there is no reason to analyze our own beliefs. I know how I feel. I am pretty sure I'm right. And so what's the point of even going over these issues? Now, of course, if that's your attitude, I'm not sure why you took this class, since that's obviously what a class like this is going to be about. But I know some of you think that, and it's actually fine if you think that. But for something like abortion, it's this interesting cross or combination of issues. It's morality, whether it's right or wrong to get an abortion or to encourage someone to get an abortion. And then there's legal issues as well. So part of the reason why Americans are so interested in the abortion debate is that it's something which is covered by law. So then our own personal moral views impact what other people are allowed to do. So if it were just a question of morality, like should you have sex before marriage or not? Or should you always tell the truth to your family or not? Right? These would be moral or ethical questions. How you view those has no impact on what other people do. They can deal with their families and whatnot however they want. But since in America abortion is regulated by law, the way you feel about the issue and your moral stance on it has an impact on the legality of the issue and therefore bumps into other people's behavior, right? It has an impact on their behavior. So, to those who would say, I don't know why we need to investigate why we think, here's one reason to investigate what you think about the ethics of abortion and other issues. Is that other people have some control through law over your behavior. And your opinions and your moral decisions, your moral viewpoints, have some impact over other people's behavior through law and political climate. So one reason to investigate these sort of issues is that it already impacts or connects to other people's lives. Reciprocally, yours impacts their life and their morality impacts your life. So, one of the things that I hope you noticed about Marquis, the reading by Marquis, is that the first part of it, the first 4 pages, are not his own position. They're a discussion of the 2 main positions on abortion. What he calls the standard anti-abortion stance and the standard pro-choice stance. And his basic claim is that the standard pro-life or anti-abortion, call it what you will, pro-life or anti-abortion argument has serious problems with it. It's a very shaky way of thinking, and it's basically morality that doesn't quite add up to a good moral stance. But, on the other hand, the pro-choice side that thinks that abortion is permissible has an equally shaky not valid moral argument. Now, connect these two things together. My point, using Marquis here to extend the point I said before, is that in America, one of the sharpest disagreements in moral and political life is abortion. Now, we all have a stance on it. And for most of us, our stance is going to look like one of the two that Marquis describes. Okay, for almost everyone. We have an opinion on this. We know other people's opinions on this. And we don't exactly vote typically on abortion laws. But in a democracy, what you think ought to be illegal and what you think ought to be legal has some impact on the actual laws. Here's the thing, though, is if Marquis is right, that most of our arguments are shaky arguments. That is, when we try to justify or defend our moral intuitions, we say things that don't quite add up, that don't quite make sense. Then no wonder it's a polarizing debate in America. No wonder we raise our voices when we talk about it. And no wonder we think the other side is a bunch of dummies who won't listen to reason. Because we hear their argument. Whichever side you're on, you hear the other side's argument. And a lot of us, we just roll our eyes and shake our heads. We say, oh, those people, they just don't get it. And then they, on the other side, roll their eyes and shake their head and go, oh, those people, they just do not get it. Now, there will always be disagreements about moral issues. That's part of what makes being a human interesting and fun, is that there's a wide variety of opinions on every issue. But Marquis is implying in the beginning that the abortion debate would not be so bitter and angry, that we would understand better where the other side was coming from, even if we continue to disagree with them, if we were more clear and had better moral ideas. This is my point, is basically Marquis says both major sides of the abortion debate make mistakes. They make claims trying to say why their position is the correct one, but they say things that don't make good sense. So of course it's not convincing to the other side. Of course the other side thinks that you're trying to pull a fast one and use, slick, dishonest moral reasoning. You're not trying to be shifty and slick, but the arguments that most of us give don't sound convincing to the other side because they're not convincing. Okay? So that's why Marquis spends so long talking about two arguments, neither of which are his. Not because he wants to say everyone else is wrong, but he's hoping, and this is a hope I have for our class as well, is that if we get more clear on what makes a good ethical argument and what is not quite as good of an ethical argument, then we'll be more sympathetic to other people's viewpoints. We'll see what kind of mistakes they're making and understand that it's natural to make those kinds of mistakes in logic. But we'll also be able to clarify our own position where it'll be more convincing and will sound better to the other side. Even if we don't change their mind, they'll at least say, hey, you know what? This person's on to something. Okay? And that's what we're hoping for in this class, and that's what Marquis is hoping for. So, all that said, the title of the Marquis reading says it straight up. Why abortion is immoral. So he thinks that abortion is immoral. But he insists, and you have to understand this. If you miss this point, you do not understand the article in general. He is not pro-life. He is not that standard anti-abortion argument that he talks about on and off for the first few pages. I've said this before about other readings. In our class, we don't want to pay attention just to the conclusion. Abortion is immoral. We want to pay attention to all the reasons given before the conclusion that are supposed to add up to that conclusion. So what we'll see is that while coincidentally Marquis ends up somewhere pretty similar to most anti-abortion people, abortion's immoral, you shouldn't do it, he arrives through a totally different path, gives totally different reasons, and in fact, in his case, specifically tells you why the reasons of the anti-abortionists are bad reasons. I say bad, of course, I mean that they don't logically make that much sense. So basically, this is something that could be on a test, or if you wrote on this for a paper, you'd have to understand. He is a third position. He is not pro-life, and he is not pro-choice. He's a different third position. All right. So, what does he say about these other two arguments? Okay. He says there's a similar problem with each one. Okay? So every moral argument, and when I say argument, I don't mean people arguing, but the kinds of things we read in this class where you present a viewpoint and you try to give justifications or proof or reasons why your moral intuition is not just how you feel, but is actually correct and should make sense to other people, not just yourself. So he says correctly that every moral argument has to have at least two parts. One is a moral claim, that something is good or bad, or that something should or should not be done. Every moral argument has to have that. Every moral argument also has to have some sort of factual claim. So this is what he says about the standard pro-choice argument that says abortion is fine. What he says is that it, like every other moral claim, gives a factual point and it gives a moral claim or a moral point. But he says there's a problem with one of these and it just doesn't function very well. He says the same basic point about anti-abortion or pro-life. It gives a moral claim and a factual claim. And the factual claim is a little hard to believe for the pro-life, anti-abortion side of the argument. So part of the issue, Marquis says, is that both of the standard ways that we conceive of abortion in this country, pro-choice and pro-life, both of them try to make some factual claim about what a fetus is. I'll say that again. Both pro-choice and pro-life try to make some factual claim about what kind of thing a fetus is. For slightly different reasons for each of them, they can't make that factual claim convincing. All they can do is present it as possibly true. Now, if you're trying to convince someone of something, and one of the major parts of your argument is something that is just possibly true, but possibly not true as well, of course the other side isn't going to be convinced by you. So that's the general stance of Marquis. Let's get into some details now, though. So what Marquis says, he says, almost everyone in America who is against abortion says something very similar. So the details might vary, but the basic core guts of the argument look like this. Okay? It says, it is always wrong to take a human life. It is always wrong to take the life of a human being. That's their moral claim. Then they make the factual claim, a fetus is a human being. Now, if you add those two up, okay, whether you agree or disagree, if both of those claims are true, that a fetus is a human being, and if it's also true that it's always wrong to take the life of a human being, add them up together and what do you get? It is always wrong to take the life of a fetus. So it's very simple the way we've condensed it here, but it's just those two claims put together. Always wrong to kill a human being, fetus is a human being, add them up and they equal, it is always wrong to kill a fetus. Okay? Now, the pro-choice side also has an argument that also has two parts. And this one's a little more confusing to condensed down. You'll understand how it works. It just sounds a little funny condensed into moral claim plus factual claim. They make the claim this. They say, a fetus is not a person. And please notice that person is a different moral category than human being. They say a fetus is not yet a person. Then they add the moral claim that it is wrong to kill persons. But it is not necessarily wrong to kill non-persons. So it's not necessarily wrong to have an abortion. Oh, sorry. Add the fact that, yes, that a fetus is not a person. It is not yet a person. Right? So once again, it's pretty simple. The way we're boiling it down. The pro-choice side says it is wrong to kill persons, but not necessarily wrong to kill non-persons. Like trees are non-persons, but they're living, but you can kill them. And they say the fetus is not yet a person, so it falls in that killable category of non-persons. And you see again that last part's a factual claim. The fetus is not a person. That's just a claim that's either true or false about what a fetus is, whereas the first part is about what you can and cannot do, what you should and should not do, what's good and what's bad. Okay, so that's just a summary of how the two arguments get phrased. What's the problem? What problem does Marquis have with these? For the pro-life position, what he says is that their position is too broad. Their moral claim is too broad. Because it says you can't kill anything that's human. But what makes something human? There's a few different ways to view this. One is to say, well, it's something with human DNA. Right? If something's got human DNA, it's wrong to kill. Another way to put the point similarly is to say, if something's got a soul, a human soul, it's wrong to kill. But here's the thing. Toenails have human DNA. It's not wrong to kill a toenail. If you have a finger which has, a disease or nerve damage or something, it's still human, it's still alive, but you can cut that off if you need to, right, for health reasons. So remember, of course you know that's not really quite what the abortionist or the anti-abortionist means. But when they try to explain their account and that's what they say, that's all we have to go on. So you see there, they've run into a snag. If you try to say it's because the fetus is human, there's all these other human things, cancer cells, skin cells, body parts, that we cut off and kill all the time. Now, if you want to go the other route and say, well, the fetus has a soul, then you're making a factual claim about the fetus, which is impossible to verify. Now, here's the thing. It might be true that a fetus has a soul at conception. But if you're trying to convince someone who doubts that the fetus has a soul at conception, merely repeating that factual claim over and over again is not going to convince them at all. It's like if I repeat right now that my shirt that I'm wearing has buttons on it, it might be true, it might be false. But if I just keep saying it, my shirt has buttons, you understand the other side's not going to react to that. How are they supposed to know? Okay, one way we can rephrase this is, prove to me that you have a soul. Okay, it's hard enough to prove that an adult human has a soul. I mean, you can't hold it in your hand, right? So how can we prove even harder for this fetus which is, hidden away inside of a person? Okay, so please note here, Marquis is not saying that people who think what we just went through are dumb. He doesn't think they're lying when they say they believe this. He's just saying it's not a perfect argument. It's got the parts we need to be a good argument, but it's only going to preach to the choir. You know what I mean? Those who already believe it are going to go for it, and those who don't are not going to go for it. Okay? There's weirdly an almost identical kind of problems going on the pro-choice side. So remember, their moral claim is that persons are things we should not kill. And you go, okay, what do you mean by person? Just like we asked the anti-abortionist, what do you mean by human being? Oh, I mean DNA, or I mean soul. You ask the pro-choice person, what do they mean by person? And they'll say, what we mean is that category of humans who have legal rights. They can speak to us, and they can vote, basically, things like that. So it's a legal status, and it's a moral status of basically those who you have equal standing with, that you owe something to, you owe respect for their rights to, and they owe you a reciprocal kind of respect for your rights. This is going to rely on things like rationality. Animals aren't rational. That's why we're allowed to eat them and kill them. It relies on an ability to recognize in yourself that you have rights, and then also recognize that other people have those rights. So we respect you as a rights-bearing person because you can respect me as a rights-bearing person. Right? So you can see that these things are just simply, they're probably not true of a fetus. Right? A fetus doesn't recognize that it has rights and that you have rights, and it needs to respect your rights. A fetus does not have language. It's not subject to contracts where it can promise you it'll do something, and you have to promise you'll do something to it as well. So it's not subject to legal protections and moral respect, just in the same way animals aren't. Right? It's not yet that kind of thing. Now here what Marquis says is, factually that seems to be pretty clear, that the fetus can't speak, and that the fetus doesn't recognize itself as a moral agent, right, with duties and obligations. But then he says, okay, but neither does a 1-day-old. Shoot, neither does a 2.5-year-old. Right? So here he thinks the moral principle gets applied in a way that nobody's going to find convincing. It's too narrow. In the way human being for pro-life included not only cancer cells and toenails and skin cells and organs, all these things we think we can kill, but it also includes, murderers, people in wartime, etc. So it includes lots of things we think we can kill. On the flip side, the the pro-choice side, it makes its principle of what can be killed and what can't too small. It basically only covers 18-year-olds, right? It seems like it might not include the mentally disabled. It doesn't include young children, like 6-month-old children. They're also not moral, legal agents yet. They don't recognize morality yet. They can't sign contracts. They don't vote, etc. So here he says the moral principle for pro-choice seems to be arbitrary when we apply it. Why apply right to life to a 1-day-old and not to a 6-month-old fetus? Right? It seems, you ask them why and they say, well, just because. So both of them, with one of their basic 2-part claims in their argument, moral side and fact side, they run into similar problems. It's more about the fact side for the anti-abortion group, and it's more about the value side for the pro-choice group. Right? Like I said, Marquis is not saying that both of these are wrong and that these people are idiots. He's just saying, if you don't already believe that, you're not going to be convinced. Because the claims being made are not convincing. They just fall short of normal, rational proof. Okay. So, I bet some of you are thinking, yeah, great. Now we know where the other two sides stand. What the heck does Marquis think himself? Because if both of those are shaky arguments, can we please have a better argument? One that's not shaky? That's strong and makes good solid sense to everybody? So that's what, beginning on page 321, Marquis tries to develop. Now this is what he says. He says, the anti-abortion side had a shaky factual claim. It's not clear what the fetus is, and it's not clear why it having DNA, for instance, why that should give it moral value. The pro-choice side had sort of a strangely applied or sloppy in its application moral value. Okay, but why does speaking and signing contracts give you sacred rights? And why do you give that to a 2-year-old but not a 6-month-old fetus? So he says, let's begin from a situation that we all agree is wrong. Then let's figure out what factual claim is true in that situation. And let's figure out what moral claim is true in that situation. See how all this builds on what I've said before? All the things I've said about how moral reasoning works, etc. He said if they had problems in these two areas, moral claim and factual claim, let's find something we all agree is morally wrong. We'll figure out the factual claim for that different situation and the moral claim for that different situation. Then we'll see if both apply to the fetus. If both clearly apply to the fetus, then we've got an airtight argument about abortion for the first time. Okay. So he says on page 321b, that second column B, he says, do you think it would be wrong to kill me right now? Me, an adult who's innocent, I'm not a mass murderer or anything like that. Do you think it would be wrong to kill me? And we can just use this me as your professor right now. Okay. Would it be wrong to kill me? Now here, I ain't even going to ask you to pause the recording. Your answer shouldn't take too much time, I hope. It should be a loud, clear, it would be wrong to kill you, professor. You got to ask the same thing of yourself. Would it be wrong for someone to kill you right now? Okay, so we all agree, hopefully, that it would be wrong to kill me and wrong to kill you right now. Now we sort of backtrack and try to figure out what argument shows why that's true. Okay, what reasons do you and I have for why it's wrong to kill either one of us right now? Okay. This is what Marquis says. He says, it would be wrong to kill him, me, or you right now because killing takes away what I have right now. It takes away everything I have right now. But more important for our argument, it also takes away everything that I might have or do in the future. We see this at the top of page 322, column A. He says, killing is wrong because of its effect on the victim. It's one of the greatest losses one can suffer. The loss of one's life deprives one of all the experiences, activities, projects, and enjoyments that would otherwise have constituted one's future. So killing is wrong, yeah, because it takes away what you have and can do right now. But it also takes away what you can have and do tomorrow, and the day after, etc. So that's why Marquis thinks it's wrong to kill him, me, or you. Things which you have sort of a moral right to, your life, your possessions, your relationships, your friends, your plans, all that stuff, poof, disappears if I kill you. And he says, unless we have some really strong reason, which in this scenario we don't presumably have any strong reason, you can't do that to a person. All right? So, the moral claim there is things which have a future of value. A future which they value. Let's be crystal clear on that, please. Things which have a future which they value or will come to value in the future are wrong to kill. Factual claim on this one's really easy. Does Marquis have a future that he values? Yes, he does. Just ask it about yourself if you want to be really sure. Do you value not only the things you have right now today, but what you might do in 5 years? What you might see and experience in 20 years? Does that feel like stuff you don't want to miss out on? Yes. Okay. So factually, you are the kind of thing that has a future which you're looking forward to, that in the moment of the future you'll enjoy. And the moral claim is it's not right to take those things unless you have a really, really good reason. Okay, so pause the recording right now if you would and just reflect on Marquis. Reflect on what he said about his own position, this future of value, and think if it's as airtight of an argument as he seems to think. Right? Do you think the factual side is crystal clear? And do you think the moral claim is, does it make sense? Does that sound like something that you also value? Okay, so pause the recording now, please, and reflect on that. Just at this level, do you think that his basic fact and his basic moral parts of his argument work well? So, a little follow-up question to that. He says, and trust me, he's right about this generally. He says that when you have a good argument, the facts are clear and believable, and the moral claim makes good moral sense to people, then the two put together should be pretty convincing. So, now that you've reflected on whether you think his is a good argument, is the fact clear, and is the moral claim, do you buy it? Now I want you to ask, what do you think of his argument right there for why killing normal, adult, innocent human beings is wrong? Do you think it's missing something? Do you think it's making some dubious claims? So basically what I want to ask you is, do you find it convincing why it's wrong to kill human beings according to him? They have a future ahead of them that they look forward to now and will appreciate in the moment it happens later in the future. Okay, so now just as I promised that we would, we then see if what we've just said about why it's wrong to kill an adult, innocent human being like you or me, if that applies to the fetus as well. If it applies, then it's wrong to kill a fetus for the same reasons as it's wrong to kill you or me. If the argument doesn't apply, then it's either not wrong to kill a fetus, or it will be wrong only for other reasons. Basically, if we can make the same factual claim about the fetus, and if we agree that the moral claim, taking away a future of value for no reason, is bad, then it'll also be bad or wrong to kill a fetus. Abortion will be immoral, as the article title claims. So he says, let's apply the argument to a fetus. Let's see if a fetus counts too. So here's the thing. There's a small difference between you and I, that right out of the gate. The fetus right now does not appreciate its future. At least, there's no way to tell, just like we can't tell if it has a soul. And please note, Marquis is not saying that the fetus right now is conscious of its life or thinking about its future. I think biologically the fetus doesn't have that capacity yet, but Marquis is not he's not relying on that at all. His point is that whether or not the fetus now thinks about, plans, considers its future, which it probably doesn't, it will come to do that in the future, and that's what's relevant. So that's the similarity which is relevant. In the same way that right now you may not be thinking about your future wedding and how great it's going to be and what kind of songs you want the wedding DJ to play. Still, if I kill you now, one of the many things that you'll miss out on is those great songs that the wedding DJ will play. Is seeing, grandma out on the dance floor, dancing with your little cousin or whatever. Okay? You don't have to be thinking about it now. You don't even have to be planning it now. It's just that if I don't kill you, you get to have that wedding someday. If I kill you, no matter exactly what you think about it now, that enjoyment which will happen in the future is taken away from you. So that's what's relevant between you and the fetus. The fetus is probably unconscious right now, but it certainly will be conscious at 27 or whatever when it gets married. If it's conscious, it'll enjoy that wedding, but it can only do that if I don't kill it. So now we just follow up. The question I asked you before, Does Marquis' argument, do the two parts of it work for killing a human being? If so, do you find it convincing? Now we just repeat that question for the fetus. Do you understand his argument as it applies to the fetus? Do you think that the factual claim and the moral claim still hold up? If so, are you convinced by his argument? And remember, you'd have to be convinced by the argument or have problems with the argument. I don't want you here to just say, no, I agree, but I'm against abortion because it's God's prerogative. Or I don't want you to say, yeah, I disagree with his argument because I think a woman should have a right to choose. Because you see how both of those ignore the argument he gave. What I'm saying is, in the argument he gave specific to fetuses, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Not do you have some other argument that's totally disconnected. What do you think about what he said there, that the fetus, while probably not conscious now, will come to value its future so long as we don't kill it? So pause the recording now and think long and hard about that one. Now this one, again, I want you to focus really on what he said. I'm interested in your own views about abortion, but as a separate topic. Here I just want to know what you think of his argument. Is it factually incorrect that a fetus has this kind of future? Or do you have some problem with the moral claim that you're not allowed to take futures away? Right? That's what we want to ask about here. And since it's actually a little trickier to do that than it might seem, we're going to end the recording here to give you time to think about it. The next recording will pick up and talk about some of the details that come afterwards. Okay, thank you everyone.